Hello, all my beautiful people. It is time once again for another amazing episode of If You Give a Dad Podcast. So, this week is my anniversary episode. I have been doing this for a year now, and I am very excited to bring a very special guest to you this week. It is somebody who I met not too long ago at the Northwest Arkansas Comic-Con. I was able to talk to him for a little bit, and he said that he wanted to come on to the podcast. I'm very excited to have on Michael Tatum today. He is a voice actor for Funimation. He's done all kinds of great animes, and I am so excited for you guys to be able to hear this episode today. I feel this is a very high achievement for me on this show, and I hope to maybe talk with him again in the future. So, for those of you who are here just to listen to the Michael Tatum episode, welcome. I hope that you enjoy what you hear, and I hope that you stick around and listen to some of the other great episodes we have here as well. So, if you guys are as excited as I am, then let's get this show on the road.
If You Give a Dad a Podcast. Hey, Dad.
So where did you actually train at?
I made a really good career out of being able to bump, sell, and I had a punch me face.
I wasn't about to call you dad, so.
Seriously?
I felt like I was in an anime or something.
People get really mad at those videos for some reason. Like it triggers
Really?
certain people. Yeah.
Wow.
I was actually lost as an infant, and I was taken in by a traveling group of independent wrestlers.
I love it. I'm excited for this one.
Bro.
Get punched in the face on the daily.
Do you always do these interviews with your shirt off?
What?
Man, this guy won't shut up.
All right, everybody. So today I have with me a guest that I have been really excited about. And you guys know this because I did announce it in the last two episodes that I would be having this guy with me. He is an American voice actor, director, and script writer. He works with Funimation, Okatron 5000, and Bang Zoom. He has played in so many different animes that I absolutely love. To name a few, it's Tokyo Ghoul, Attack on Titan. One of my favorites, Full Metal Alchemist, Brotherhood. And he also plays the voice of Tenya Ida in My Hero Academia. He's done some video game voice acting as well as some movies as well. And I am so excited to have him on today. Michael Tatum, how are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing splendidly. How are you doing? Thanks for that lovely introduction, by the way. I feel so official when you put it like that.
I try to make, hype people up whenever they're coming on here. That way, they feel good when they talk to me and everything.
Nice. Well, you're doing a bang up job. Well done.
Well, I appreciate that. So we'll kind of just jump right into things here a little bit. And how did you get into voice acting?
Well, it's kind of a story, actually. So, I'll do these conventions and do a panel or something, and I always get asked by young people, like, how do I get into voice acting? And I feel so unqualified to answer because things have changed so much. I mean, I'm doing this for 2005. Yeah, 2005. So we're closing in on 20 years of doing this. And it was a very, very, very different industry when I started. It was very niche. And just with no one in those days had any idea would ever go mainstream, and here we are all these years later where it's a big business, and how cool is that? But yeah, when I started, it was possible to be quote unquote discovered. Frankly, because the competition wasn't that fierce. Not that the other actors weren't amazing. There just weren't very many of us in those days.
Right.
And so, once things were coming down the pike from Japan, people, directors and producers were like, we need more actors. We need more actors. I mean, you go and look at the early Dragon Ball stuff. I mean, this is why most of those actors in the show played like 8 different parts. There were only like 12 voice actors in all of Texas in those days, and it's a much larger number now. So I got into it. So little backstory on me. I've been an actor since I was very little. I started on stage when I was about 9 or 10.
Okay.
And just fell in love with it. I just did a lot of children's theater growing up. Then as I got older, I did just all sorts. And then there came that time, where we all face, I suppose, when I was like, well, I have to make a decision. Do I want to continue pursuing acting, my passion, or do I want to eat? And so I chose food.
Of course,
and, I kind of fell into a whole other industry that had nothing to do with acting. I just I felt like it was a very grown-up thing for me to have done. I'm like, oh, it's tragic. I must say, goodbye to my love and be one of those things they call an adult and, earn money and work a job I hate. And so I did that for several years in my 20s. And, but of course there was always that side of me that I still missed acting and being more creative, which I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do in day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just happened to meet Christopher Bevins. He was dating a friend of the guy I was dating at the time, and we all kind of would convene for these Sunday dinners at a friend's house, so many years ago now. And Sunday dinners, who still does that, right? And we just started a group of these friends that we all we lived in the same neighborhood, and Bevins was came within that orbit because he was dating one of the regulars, and that's how I met him. And we just had a lot in common. We were both kind of comic book nerds, and we were both big Doctor Who fans, things like that. And after several years of knowing him, he was like, "Hey, man, so I direct out at Funimation, the Dragon Ball people, and I'm working on this show. It's brand new, and we want to start on it in a couple of weeks here. And I'm looking for some new voices. Do you want to come in and audition for this part?" And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you. Absolutely not."
What?
I had no concept of what voice acting. Well, I was a stage actor, a little bit of on camera, which is a totally different beast. I've never set foot in a sound booth before. Had no idea what mic technique involved, anything. And so I was like, "Oh, no. You're very sweet, but I am just not qualified. And I have, I fell off the wagon years ago. So no, you can't, I'm not your guy." And fortunately for me, Bevins just doesn't take no for an answer. So his tactic was to call me every day around the same time after I'd gotten off of work. And he'd be like, "Hey, man, what's going on? So I have this show I'm working on. I'd like to get some new voices in. Are you interested?" And I'm like, whoa. What? He's totally gaslighting me.
Yeah.
As friends do. And
right. Yes.
And he finally, and I just kept saying, "I really appreciate it, but I just don't think I'm what you're looking for. And I'm not qualified. And I just didn't have the confidence, whatever." And he finally made up this egregious lie. He said, "Look, full disclosure, you're not actually going to get the part. I just need you to come in and kind of audition to kind of lay down a scratch track for whoever does get the part, because we're kind of on a crunch here. And the person I want's not going to be able to come in and spend a lot of time on it. So, whatever." He's a sneaky bastard. And he's like, "And it's great. So you come in and you'll just can say the words, you'll suck, we'll laugh, and we'll never speak of it again. You'll be doing me a favor and I'll pay you." And so it'll be like a paid audition, but not really an audition. And so I was like, all right, well, that's okay. You know what? I'll get a tour of the studios. It'll be fun. It'll be a story.
Yeah.
So I finally went in on a Sunday. That doesn't happen anymore. I went in on a Sunday afternoon, and the engineer that was engineering the session is now one of the executive producers at Crunchyroll. So this is
oh wow,
imagine these days, right? And and it was boot camp for me. It was a 4-hour session. Mm-hmm. I had to I was matching animation, what we call matching the flaps, and Bevins, I'd never seen him in director mode before. He was a task master. And it was work. And I was like, no, more emotion. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And, and I was slowly learning how to, reading a dub script is a very different thing than any other type of script. The formatting is different. There's different lingo. There's different, all sorts of weird technical things in it that you have to kind of process in order to know what's expected of you. Mm-hmm. And I was being taught how to do that. It was all just there in those first 4 hours. And then he was like, "All right, you're done. Here, come out and sign all these little NDAs." And I did. I didn't read them, which was my first, or maybe at that point, my fifth mistake. And I said something to him along the lines of "How do you, motherfucker, get anything done up here if it takes you this long? I'm not even the guy." And he was like, "Oh, no, okay. Actually, it only took you 10 minutes to audition, and you got the part, and we just recorded the first 6 episodes.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
what's going to go on the DVD, and you just signed a contract, so you got to be here for the next batch next week.
Wow.
So you're an actor now, and that's how he got me.
Oh wow, he's sneaky there.
And then sneaky bastard. So it's his fault. He's the one that unleashed me. He's the doctor. He's the Dr. Frankenstein that unleashed Tatum upon the world of voice acting, much to everyone's chagrin. And
so we have him to thank then.
Yes, and he'll admit it. Oh, he'll admit it. He's proud, bastard. So, whenever someone asks me, how do I get into voice acting? I'm like, hey, do what I do. Turn your back on acting altogether for several years. Wait for someone to come along and actually just throw an opportunity at you. Refuse it multiple times, and then allow yourself to be tricked into it. Worked for me.
That's sage advice right there, too.
Yeah, I'll be writing a how-to book this summer.
So you said that writing dubs and reading the script for dubs is much different. I can imagine because you kind of have to match up because you also are a writer now as well. You have to kind of match up because, you're using the animation from a Japanese show, and then you're trying to turn it over to an English translation that also kind of matches up with the way the mouth is moving as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How do you go about doing that? Kind of, can you explain what your process is on doing this?
Well, it's interesting, because if you've done acting of that kind, it helps considerably because it's all in the timing. I compare it to playing in a musical ensemble. Where you may be the cellist or the violinist or whatever, and you have notes in front of you that you have to play. That's the tune. Those are the harmonies.
Right.
But the rhythm is coming from outside, and you're just completely enslaved to that rhythm. You have to observe what the conductor is. You have to note the conductor's baton, or at least what everyone else in the orchestra is doing.
Right.
And that's kind of the challenge of music. Is it's always this kind of conflict between self-expression, but also restricting it within very, very, very often very strict boundaries. And so I'm a musician as well. I have been for as long as I've been an actor.
Oh, great.
I don't know if I'm terribly good at one or the other, but I've had more luck with acting, that's for sure. But it helped me a lot with dubbing, because it's like, okay, I have these words I have to say. There's the animation on the screen. The mouth movements are this. There's the vowel sounds. There's this. And if the writer's done their job, it's fairly easy. But you do still have to observe, like, oh, maybe I'm feeling it and I want to say it a little longer. We don't have to have the time. You got to find a way to say it believably in the time given. And writing it is more or less the same thing. And I don't know that I could really describe the process. I know that, we have there are often a team of translators that will give you as close to a literal translation of the dialogue as possible in Japanese. And of course that won't work because it doesn't hit the same grammatical peaks and troughs. It would fall completely flat if you tried to read a literal translation, because Japanese and English just function syntactically so different than each other. Yeah. So it's like, how do I weave this into a line that sounds natural in English, but also observes the timing? And in the old days, because I've been writing almost as long as I've been in the industry, because I started about a year or two in writing just to help support myself. In any creative business, you have to wear a lot of hats, and writing was very quickly one of them for me. And for me, the process is I take liberties. I've always taken liberties with the literal dialogue, and I focus on what's the subtext. What's the character really trying to say? The rule of thumb in communication, and especially when you're writing anything dramatic, is that characters tend almost never to say exactly what they mean or mean exactly what they say. There's always this tension between what they feel they'd rather be saying versus what they feel they can. So, like if you're watching a romantic comedy, everything hinges on, is the person finally going to say they love you? Right. And if they, but we understand from the beginning that when they say, hey, how you doing? What they really mean is, I love you. And, but they can't say that yet. We have to see them go on that journey until finally the tension between, what they want to say and what they feel bound to say reaches such a fever pitch that they finally just say, I love you, and then, and scene. But so there's always that, like, okay, what's going on literally, and what's it coding, what's underneath it. And then once I've got that, once I have a handle of what that is, then I can write something in English that approximate what's literally being said, but captures just as well the subtext, which is, the story is always about subtext. It's always about subtext. Everything else is just surface. Even though a clever line of dialogue is still there to make you go, oh, but what they really mean is this. Yeah. That's just how it works. And I kind of love writing adaptations, because my favorite thing about writing when I do it is character, and how characters use language to express or choose not to express themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's my chief concern whenever I write anything. Like, that's what I look at the dialogue. I love that. It's great that someone else has already taken care of all the plot things. I don't have to worry about all that scaffolding. I just now get to fill it in with the fun bits, the bits that people will lean into and be hit by, because that's the plot's just there. I shouldn't say just, but the plot's really there to serve as the structure within which these beautiful little moments can happen. And I get to focus on those beautiful little moments, which is really wonderful. It's what I feel it's what I'm good at, what I'm interested in. And that's kind of the process. In the old days, it used to be such a slog. I'd go through and I'd count flaps. Okay, that's 5 flaps. So I've got 5 syllables, and then of course I'd get scripts come back to me going, this is too slow. Because you can't, no one just, so I had to pay closer attention and be a little more nuanced with how the mouth movements were. Like, no, not every flap is a syllable, because that forces people to talk too slow. You know what I mean? And then okay. Yeah. And it was really slow going, trying to churn that out. And then something clicked a little while in. And then I got to a point where I would sit down, watch the episode all the way through in Japanese, mm-hmm. Several times, and just kind of get a feeling with the translated script in front of me. So I kind of knew what was going on. Okay. And then I would watch it at different speeds. And then mark when, what's going on in this scene? Where's the peak in this scene? What's the emotional peak in this scene or whatever, and just kind of look at the whole thing as a piece of music. Like, here's the thrilling part, here's the slow part, here's the scary part, whatever. And then I would just sit down and mute it and just watch the animation and just let these characters talk to me, and I'd write down what they say. That sounds very, hoity-toity, but it's true.
That's really cool, though. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you enter into it, it's very much like acting for me, where eventually you just kind of have to get out of your own way and be like, no, the character is you. Just do what you would do in this situation and stop overthinking it, and writing is much the same way for me, except I'm getting to play all the characters. Which is its own challenge and gift at the same time. But that's more or less how it works. I make it sound so simple, don't I?
Yeah, you do. I mean, yeah, I feel like I know what I'm doing now on it too. So, so one thing that I have noticed, and this is just from my years of watching anime and stuff, I prefer. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, not from you, but I prefer dubs instead of subs when it comes to anime. But one thing I've noticed, I will put the subs on and I'll also listen to it. And one thing that I notice a lot of times, they don't match up exactly when it comes to what is on the screen and what they're actually saying. And why is that? Is it because one is being translated from words and one is being translated from the actual voice, or how does that actually work?
So here's the thing, they're neither version is necessarily truer to the original than the other, because they both have their own restrictions that keep them from being able to do everything exact point for point. And again, it comes back to, you have to understand that as languages that have both been around for centuries, Japanese and English have developed in complete isolation from each other for most of their existence. Right. And so there's not, say, if I'm translating something from French into English, it's far less challenging because there's already so many points of connection between those two languages. 75% of English is just French pronounced differently. Yeah. But the grammar is very similar, so there's not a lot of, but that's also when we're just talking about literal use of language. When you're talking about a literary or figurative language. Every language, every country, every culture has its own storehouse, if you will, of figures of speech, of metaphor. And they're different. Like in English, the word rose might evoke certain things, usually evokes love. That's just, and there's no real logic to why. That's just, some poet used it as a metaphor in a sonnet 400 years ago, and now that it's stuck.
Right.
But a rose may not mean the same thing in Japan. Like it may, they have roses over there, of course they do. But it may not have the same connotations by just luck of the draw. Okay. Great example is, and I'm going to be rambling here, so forgive me, but a great example is in English speaking countries, generally, if we want to call someone a bad actor, like we're looking at a performance and it's just,
yeah,
I've done a few of those myself. We typically say that person is wooden. We might call them a ham. Of course, we're not being literal. It's figurative speech. We're not really saying, "Oh, that's a ham." They're not a ham, but they're hamming it up somehow. The image of a ham invokes for most people someone that's just not doing is overacting, right? Or wooden, someone that's not acting very well at all. And the same metaphor exists in Japan, but it's a daikon radish, right?
Okay.
So imagine a line, and this has happened before in an anime that I helped adapt, where they're calling someone on stage a daikon radish. And it's funny because it's a known quantity. Like everyone in Japan, like they make a joke out of the daikon radish. It's actually in the animation. Suddenly, the character is actually dressed as a radish. Okay. So it's really on the nose and it's very funny. Yeah. But in English, that's a complete non sequitur because radishes don't connote that for us. They just don't, right? So what do you do? Like, well, now you have to change to adapt that. You might write the line, you can just leave it a non sequitur, but then now the humor is coming from somewhere else and it's engaging a different part of the viewer's brain because instead of just having something immediately that they get that makes them laugh, they're now having to kind of decode it, and that puts them in a different frame of mind. And so you have to be like, whatever. And so, well, I can't do anything. The characters in the animation, the character's dressed like a radish. What do I do? And then, so I might change the words around, observing, of course, the animation and the flaps and the timing. And instead of just having to go, oh, they're a radish, I might have one character be like, well, they're a radish. And the other person might be like, don't you mean a ham? Then,
okay.
Then the same humor is coming through at the expense of the same character, which is the point. And you're kind of honoring both the Japanese but also not losing your audience in English at the same time. It's a challenge. Yeah. Japanese is also an extraordinarily high contact language. There's a lot of things that a lot of known sayings that just don't like that most casual viewers in any other language aren't going to understand on their own. Like achoto means like it's a little, and that's all it is. It just means it's a little like ... And it's understood in Japan that if someone says that to you, like, hey, do you like this dress? And this, that means like, no, I don't. It's a little much, Okay. But that doesn't quite, there are things similar to that in English, but you just have to find what they are. Right. And that's why subtext is so important, right? So getting back to your question of why subtitles and the vocal, dub is different is because, one, there's so many options that a translator can use to kind of try to communicate what's being said. Like I said, there's no such thing as a 1-to-1 ratio between words and their usage in a sentence. I mean, in some cases, yes, but for the most part, it's like, no, once the longer and more involved the sentence, the higher context needed. And so a translator likewise has to make decisions in order for what they're writing on the page for you to make sense. So you know what you're dealing with. And so every act of translation is, in fact, an act of adaptation at the same time, whether they want to, tell you that or not. And a subtitled version has its own restrictions. There's only so many words you can fit on a screen and expect, for so long before you have to change, whatever, because people aren't going to have time to read 3 sentences in the space of a second. So now you've got to take those 3 sentences and give a summary. Okay. And you can't cover the screen. It can only be there at the bottom. And so that's similar to the restrictions we observe with the flaps, Okay. So, but it's a different it's a different order of restrictions, a different nature. There's just a difference to it so that the end products are going to come out a little differently because they're working within very different, although similar restrictions. One is spatial and the other one is temporal.
Okay.
Put it generally speaking.
All right. Yeah.
That was a long walk.
Well,
let me try to adapt that into one line.
There you go. So I'm going to kind of go into, we've kind of talked about a few technical things when it comes to what you do and things like that, but I want to kind of get into some things about you actually. So what would you say is your favorite anime that you have been in?
Oh, I hate this question.
Well, because every fan base is going to be like, oh man, not that one, you know.
Yeah, there's always, he didn't pick mine.
Exactly.
There's a lot. I mean, honestly, I love what I do so much as an actor that I just I always get something out of the process, right? So I always come away from it with a memory that I cherish. And sometimes even maybe discover something about myself I wasn't prepared to that then stays with me forever. But so they all have something, you know, and they're all the characters I've ever played. They're all still here in my head, and they all argue with each other all the time. And so if I pick a favorite, it's like they're all going to be like, oh, not me. Okay, we understand. And I have to deal with that. But I will say, I think the most transformative experience I've had, and I pick transformative because I think as an actor, that's why most of us get into acting of whatever stripe, because we want to transform, we want to become something, or you know, let some other part of our personality come to the surface that doesn't usually have the means. That's what drew me to acting anyway. And I think the most transformative experience I've ever had in the booth, and so it's my favorite show to have worked on, was Steins Gate.
Okay.
Which I also worked on as an adaptive writer with Patrick Seitz. And both of those jobs transformed me quite a bit as a person, as an actor. It was one of those milestone moments in one's life where I'm like, I'm not the same as I was when I started this. And if that sounds like bullshit, I can assure you that it was also one of the hardest things I've ever done. Like, it was, I hated doing it.
Oh, okay.
Because of what an emotional roller coaster it was.
Right.
But I loved it at the same time. And it's still hard to go back and watch parts of it, because parts of it are just too real, because I was really, there were moments in the booth playing Okabe, the main character, that I kind of lost Michael a little bit, or you know, the line between me and him kind of faded.
I got you.
That I was like, oh, I'm losing my fucking mind here. I've got to, and I had to kind of learn how to. Everyone knows what method, or thinks they know what method acting is, right? Like people like Jared Leto, who like become the character 24/7 while they're working, and do really awful things sometimes to prove they're in character. But that's really not what method is. Right. Lee Strasberg, who developed the method, like, it was about being able to turn the character on and off. That was key to the method. So it wasn't like, so he would, you know, I'm sure Strasberg would actually be quite horrified at what passes for method acting now, where people, they just are the character for months at a time or years. Right. And he'd be like, no, that's not the point. The point is to be able to find that character and have them so lodged in a particular place in your life that you can evoke them and also banish them in a breath, turn it on and off. Because, you know, that's acting. It's acting. Otherwise, it's psychosis, and that's not what we're going for.
Right.
And I hadn't learned that in voice acting until I played this character, when I was like, oh God, because I'd go in the booth and I'd play him, you know, just about every day, 3 or 4 days a week for 8 hours a stretch, because he talked constantly. I know, part I was born to play. And but then I'd have to come home and work on the scripts for the episodes coming down the wire. And so I just never really had a chance to get emotionally away from that show. And it is quite a ride. Like, the show itself goes to some really, really dark places, very realistically. And, you know, and so this character just gets run through the ringer. And at the end of it, you're like, oh, holy shit, what did I just do?
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. I hadn't felt that way in voice acting before. I'd had a great time doing it and connected with all my characters, or at least hoped I had.
Yeah. But
I'd never been kind of possessed by one before. And that's sort of what happened with Steins Gate. I still think it's some of my best work, but I had to learn a lot about boundaries.
Yeah.
Creative boundaries. And that. Yeah. So it's become my favorite, because I think I learned the most about myself as an actor working on that show.
That's cool. You do hear that a lot about people. They get too into the character and it becomes almost unhealthy for them. Like, I've heard of other actors who have done that with method acting, and to where I think there was even one. I think it was Evan Peters. He plays in the American Horror Story. And he was talking about how he had to take a break from doing American Horror Story because it was putting him in such a dark place doing those characters all the time.
I used to think stories like that were bullshit. I thought, actors being like, oh no, I have to go to a very dark place. But it's not like a sort of dark you would understand. I get my dark shipped in from like Europe. It always kind of struck me as very kind of high-handed and just, self-promoting. But I don't believe that anymore. After having experienced it myself, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that shit happens. Especially for actors that are very committed to the part. It's all about living truthfully in imaginary circumstances, and the more truthful you are, the more real those circumstances become for you, and it's hard to get away from them and remind yourself, like, this isn't the show,
right?
And sometimes a really powerful show is saying something about real life that is hard to ignore if you're living it. It's like because I was also the audience. I was the target audience for that show, Steins Gate. It's the kind of show that I would love and watch and obsess over, even if I had nothing to do with it, created, professionally. And so it was, there's a scene, and I don't want to give it away. It's a very convoluted plot anyway. So I'd spend the rest of the interview just describing the show to you, but it involves time travel and the consequences of time travel.
Okay.
And it handles it very, very well. Very cleverly, and very it's so emotionally grounded that you're like, holy shit, this is a good show. It's more about the emotional journey of these characters that find this ability to change the present, and in ways that they go, oh shit, there's consequences. But I just wanted this, and now this comes with it. It's so, and this is the most oversimplified description I'd ever given of that show. But there's a scene where my character, about halfway through, has an extraordinarily emotional moment. He has a complete breakdown and is crying and is just begging, someone not to do a thing that he knows they're going to do. He's seen it. He's revisiting it, in a way. And so he knows there's just nothing he can do. And it's a heartrending moment where he finally, up to this point, he's a bit arrogant. He's really a nobody. And he copes with that by being kind of over the top and insufferable. And but you understand it's all a ruse, that that's his coping mechanism, and he loses that coping mechanism in that moment. He finally realizes the only way that there's any chance that I can stop this horrible thing from happening that I know is going to happen is if I just be real and tell this person, like, I'm nothing, I'm shit, please just don't do this. And I get emotional just talking about it now, but I cried in the booth. I was like, I mean, like, I don't mean like cry, like cinematic, like one tear down one cheek, perfectly lit. I mean like ugly cry. They kind of afterwards, it's like I'm a little kid that's just been grounded and I'm in my room being like, and it was ridiculous, right? And the show's director, Colleen Clinkenbeard, who incidentally is also the director for My Hero Academia's dub. Okay. So I've known her for years, and she was on this journey with me. But she was like, Michael, honey, are you okay? And I was like, and she's like, why don't you go and splash some on your face, walk around, let's take a break, let's find Michael again. And so I did, and I'm walking around the studio. I came back in being ready. Okay, well, let's do another take, because of course I fucked that up. And she was like, actually, everything you did worked really well. Do you want to keep it, or do you want to do it again? Only this time, she wanted to give me the opportunity to have a little more control over over the performance than I did in the first take. Right. And I was like, Dad, I'm not doing that again. Let's just use what's there. So, like, if it works, do it. And so exactly. And so now it's incidentally become a great plug for the show. I'm like, if you want to hear me, J. Michael Tatum, have a complete mental breakdown, you can hear it in that scene, because they kept it. It's that character's breakdown is me just having a breakdown in the booth. Okay. And just because I'm a professional, I stayed on mic. But so, yeah. I don't know what that says about me, that's my favorite show.
That is actually one I have not seen that I want to watch, because I know I have read about that show, and it love the plot and everything for it. And so
it is
probably here pretty soon. Show. I will be watching it. Yeah.
It's a brilliant show, and I am so proud of the dub team's work on it. I think every cast member is great.
Yeah.
I think the writing, it's the best writing I've ever done. Patrick Seitz, who wrote it with me, is one of the best writers in the business, and he just pulled out all the stops. Colleen, it was just it's one of my favorites. And again, I would say the same thing about that show if I'd had nothing to do with it professionally. I just think it's a great show, and it was such an honor to get to localize it.
Okay.
But yeah, life changer. When the sequel came down the wire 7 years later, I was like, oh, no, don't make me do this again. But we did, and it was its own journey.
I think my most favorite that you have been in, and this might show my age a little bit, but Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is probably one of my most favorite animes, hands down. And your character Scar in there is probably, on top of that, he's one of my favorite characters because he has such a development in the show. Such
he
a
really
development,
does. He was one of my favorites. The original anime based on the franchise came out before I'd gotten into the industry, so I wasn't in it. Right. Though I remember after I'd been voice acting, little baby voice actor for like a year, Mike McFarlane was like, hey, I got to do some extras on the Conqueror of Shambhala, and I think I was like Soldier B or A or something who got shot and died, and I was like, red letter day for me, I got to be in Full Metal, and then years later, they're like, hey, do you want to be Scar in Brotherhood? And I was like, what? And it's funny, true story. Like I was so giddy and so excited and so very unprofessional when I got that gig. I came in the booth and I was like, okay, Rico, we're doing this. And somewhere in the halls of Funny or Crunchyroll now is a recording of me doing my first full line as Scar to set the voice, and for that to be the reference we'd use going forward. So they'd always pick like a larger line. Mm-hmm. And it was somewhere was a recording of me saying, foolish alchemists who turn their backs on the ways of God shall be punished. Followed by and Mike McFarlane, the director, is now one of my best friends now for years, just looked at me through the glass like, what was that? And I was like, nothing, it's fine. Let's I think we found the voice, I was just so giddy to get to be in the show and to play Scar, because you're right. He's such a developed character. He's such a great kind of sustained meditation on the trope of the noble adversary, the villain who has a point. Right. And God, it was just such a journey. And I feel like, because Brotherhood followed the manga. Yes. Much closer because the manga was done by the time they got started with the anime. Yeah. And with that anime. So you get to see Scar as he was really meant to be, I think. Although I have to say, I love Damien Clark's performance in the original dub. Mm-hmm. That's still my Scar. That's the Scar I'm the fan of, is Damien Clark's. And I met him years later and was like, hey, hi, do we have to fight now? But he was incredibly gracious. He would have taken the role if he could, but he was working on a movie at the time and just couldn't fly back to Dallas without going out of contract. And so they were like, well, it's a different enough, and of course several other actors had to be replaced because Aaron Dismuke had aged out of that voice playing Al. And so that went to the wonderful Maxie Whitehead. And so, and Mike was like, well, it's a retelling of a story fans already know, and it's going in a different direction about halfway through. So, recasting can make sense. And so we kind of made Scar. I think they made Scar differently. And so we were able to approach the performance differently. Right. I still think they're both wonderful shows in their own right. But
yes, they are. And, I did watch the original one first. And of course, it's an interesting the movie that they had come out at the end to kind of wrap things up. And it was an interesting way of taking it. It wasn't something that I actually saw coming. So when I rewatched with Brotherhood, I was like, okay, to me, it made a little bit more sense with the way that they did it, because obviously, like you said, that one follows the manga, but they're both very good stories.
Yeah, they really are. And I mean, that's the reason they're still among the most popular shows ever done in an anime. I've been very lucky in my career to get to kind of hoist my flag on a lot of cool legacy properties after the fact. When they're getting to be revisited and worked on by fans of the original. That's happened multiple times in my career, and it's just not to say that the originals aren't great, but
Right.
we don't often know what we have then.
Yeah.
And it's so lovely to get to come back and work on a different iteration of a show that we now know how good it is. And we now, there's now just tons of people that have a very close relationship with the material. And it's so cool. It's so freaking cool. Like, case in point, like I was never in the original Fruits Basket anime, which was kind of a watershed anime, especially for Funimation back in the day. But it was right as I was starting, and I don't even think I auditioned for it. It just was one of those things. It didn't kind of come into my orbit. But then, all these years later, 20 plus years later, I'm a pivotal character in the film that came out, and I was like, God, they're retrofitting me now and all these classic shows. It's wonderful because I get to feel young and old at the same time.
So outside of doing this, do you have any hobbies that you like to do?
Yeah, I like to compose music.
Okay.
Like I said, I mentioned earlier, I've played piano from a very young age. My grandfather was a pianist, a really good one too. And so he taught me when I was very little. In fact, I think I probably had a relationship to music longer than I have with acting. I think I found acting around 9 or 10, but I can't remember a time when I wasn't playing piano.
Okay.
That's how far back it goes. And so I started, I hadn't really, it became my pandemic hobby. I started composing orchestral works because I'd always meant to, and I just hadn't had a lot of time. But, being stuck at home for 2 years, there was no longer an excuse. So I started writing like little orchestral pieces and stuff, and nothing. I mean, I might put it out there one day, and it's just kind of a hobby to do. It's like cooking, it's for me. But I liked, I also write my own stuff. I love to teach. I love to teach acting. I do that when I can. I guess I wouldn't call that a hobby, but for me, I approach it with the passion as one would a hobby, because I love teaching.
Right.
And other than that, no. And then spoiling my French bulldogs, going to the gym. My life isn't terribly interesting beyond I'm a homebody. I read a lot. I'm not dramatic material. Like, I'm not a good subject of a drama, because from the outside looking in, I looked so boring. Just a guy sitting in a chair reading a book with a gin and tonic on the table next to him, maybe playing a piano here and there, or watching a true crime documentary. I mean, that's basically what I do. So, I'm not like mountain climbing or jumping out of planes. It's nothing quite so. I save all the action for the animation I'm dubbing.
Hey, that sounds all right by me. I've got 2 young kids at home, so that quiet time where I can read or do music or things like that, then I appreciate those things. So sounds great to me.
Yeah. It's nice. I'm not gonna lie, it's nice. I'm very lucky. I not that anything really good came out of the pandemic, but let's just say I was ready for that lockdown. I was like, I'm good, you guys. And now that we've more or less gone back to normal, I'm like, oh shit, now I have to come up with excuses not to socialize.
Yeah, socializing isn't always the greatest. So I get that.
I'm a bit of a hermit, actually. I know I don't sound like one, but I'm actually a terrible introvert. Really, really introverted. Like, I don't do
big social gatherings.
Very much. Like, it's different at cons, because everyone who's there likes me, or they wouldn't be at my table, presumably. Right. So I have the advantage. But but even then, it's really draining. I guess someone explained to me recently that the difference between an extrovert and introvert isn't necessarily that one is withdrawn socially and that the other isn't. It's like that. It's about where you get your energy from and what you have to do to recharge. Right. Extroverts really get energy from social interaction, and so sustained solitude really drains their batteries, and they need socialization to recharge. And for introverts, it's the opposite. They can socialize and even enjoy it as I can, but they can only do it for so long before they need to recharge in seclusion. And that's pretty much, and most of I think it's why I'm a writer. Writers tend to be very introverted.
Yes.
It's also why I'm an actor, because introverts need a script. And so, but it's worked for me, so I can't complain.
Yeah,
I lean into it.
So I know you. Whenever I talk to you at Comic-Con, which I think is a great story of me meeting you and stuff like that, because it was just on a whim that I was like, maybe I can get you on my podcast one day. And you were like, yeah, sure, why not? It kind of threw me off, 'cause I didn't expect you to say that. So,
well, shit, if I'd known that, I'd have been more difficult. If I'd known your threshold was higher, I would have been far more difficult to get a hold of. Damn it.
Well,
you should lead with that next time.
Well, I mean, then yeah, So I know that you said that you've also done a podcast. It's called Ghoul Intentions.
Right. With my best friend Jamie Markey, who's also a voice actor. She's also a voice actor writer.
Okay.
She works for Gearbox, the people that brought us the Borderlands franchise, among many other fine things.
Okay.
And she and we've known each other for, about 20 years at this point. And we bonded over ghost stories. I love a good paranormal story. I always have. And I'm something of a skeptic. I want to be clear. I don't believe in everything, but I love a good story. Like, I love the suspension of disbelief. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, there's some shit going on there. And she's the same way. We bonded. We were in the studios together working on something. And then, we just started casually sharing ghost stories that, personal experiences that we'd had. And we bonded. We're like, oh my God, you're one of them. You're one of those people that loves ghost stories. Oh my God. And so we started hanging out, and everyone just understood if Jamie and Michael are in the room together, at some point, the topic of conversation is going to circle around to, so have you had anything weird happen in your life?
That's cool.
And then, one day we just decided, why the fuck aren't we doing a podcast about this? We have so many stories, and that developed into us kind of just, why don't we, we wanted to do deep dives on topics that we'd known about for a while, but really hadn't looked into. So we'd choose, really the format became us, coming to the table each week with our drinks and our research and being like, all right, Jamie, I've got a story for you and you're going to be surprised. And she doing the same thing with me. And we're just basically trying to scare the shit out of you or entertain the other person with our well-researched deep dives into various otherwise well-known paranormal topics. So we've done stuff on everything from the Winchester Mansion, which is one of my favorite debunking episodes, what we would call an actually, and to all like haunted colleges. We would do those for a slew. It was just super fun. And then we kind of branched off. There was a little something we called ghosticles.
Okay.
Where we would read and discuss user submissions, where people were encouraged to write in their own experiences. And sometimes they were quite terrifying or funny. It was really cool. And so it just kind of formed this little community. Sadly, we don't do it anymore.
Okay.
We've decided we're both too busy. After I moved out to LA, a couple of years ago, and she moved out to El Paso in Texas. So we're no longer living near each other, though we do keep in touch, of course. And we drive out to see her every chance we get.
Right.
But it's just not practical to do the podcast anymore, especially with the amount of research we would like to do for each episode. And so we're like, well, I think we should probably quit while we're ahead. And so we did, but it still has, I think, over 200 episodes out there that are, on the average episode's about 2 hours. And then the ghosticles usually go on for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. It just depends on how much. We're both talkers. And we just started doing that, and it was really fun. It was a really fun. I think we did it for about 4 years.
Okay.
3.5, 4 years. And we might revisit it at some point. We might come back and do little special episodes. But it was a ball, and I'm really proud of the work we did on that show together. It was definitely a labor of love for both of us. And that's, not always the case with podcasts. Sometimes, you're like, but we both loved the subject. We loved our community. And it also helped us through some pretty tough times. Jamie was going through some shit at one point. I was as well. And getting to do that podcast really, without going into too much detail, that podcast really helped us feel seen. And loved at a time when it wasn't so obvious for some of us in this industry. And that's as much as I'll say about that, except to say that we're very grateful for the listeners we had. And it was really a lot of fun. And maybe we will come back at one point and do some more, because still, every time I look at the internet, there's more ghost stories to either debunk or do a little more research on it. Be like, oh shit, shit's even weirder than you think.
Well, I mean, even if you look on like TikTok or something like that, there's always something weird on there too.
True facts. Some of it's ridiculous.
Yes, most definitely.
And we did some episodes on those, which were really funny. But some of them were like, I think one of my favorite episodes we did, and we'd often do 2 or 3 parters depending on the length or just the scope of the subject. But one of my favorites I know that I did was the Skinwalker Ranch story.
Okay.
Which we did a 2-parter on, and it was crazy. And then not long after the podcast, not that there's no connection here, of course, not that I'm aware of, but they started doing a documentary series on it, where they have like a new team of researchers on site, still having weird experiences, and it's really cool. And I'm like, oh, hey, we did a show on that like a year and a half ago. So it's really cool. But so there's a nice little mix of episodes where we kind of debunk some urban legends, or a couple of episodes where we actually confirm some urban legends and whatnot. But that's always the fun part, the research,
right?
And it's really cool. We do it with our. I think the podcast works because we're such good friends, and we have our senses of humor.
Yes.
Complement each other beautifully.
Yeah.
And she's very real and kind of to the bone, and I'm a pompous ass who tries too hard to sound intelligent. And and together we fight crime. And it's really a lot of fun.
You have to have that.
So
chemistry.
go listen. You absolutely do. I mean, it's important, it's why certain podcasts like that's why certain true crime podcasts do so well. What's the name of the one? I was just trying to. Oh, I just lost
Morbid?
it. What's it called? Huh?
Morbid?
Oh, that's one. The murder podcast. The My Favorite Murder. Yeah, that was the first one I'd ever heard. That was like, these people have wonderful chemistry, and that is making this so much more fun than it has any right to be, because it's about murder.
Right.
But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't fascinated. But it's nice to you feel like you're just kind of sitting down and having a gossip session with your friends.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it. That's what podcasts. That's the appeal for me.
Right.
And God, I'm talking about it now, and I really miss doing it. It's been about a year since we stopped. We decided to go out on a high note and both cover subjects that we had been warming to for years, but didn't quite want to cover because they were like our favorite spooky subjects. And we finally did them for the last episode.
Okay. Well, so as you're
times.
talking about this and saying that it's a year, this episode is actually my year anniversary episode. So
happy anniversary.
Thank you. March 11th was the first. March 11th a year ago was the first time I put out an episode on my own podcast. I did another one with another guy, and it didn't really work out too well. We decided that we wanted to talk about different things and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, went my way. He decided to start doing his music more, which, if he wants to do that, that's great. I'm still friends with the guy. It's just we weren't wanting to have the same kind of episodes and stuff. So I did this.
And that makes a difference. So you kind of branched out on your own to talk about what you want to talk about.
Exactly.
Nice.
I'm a nerdy dad, and I have all these things I like to talk about. I talk about anime. I talk about wrestling. Last week's episode was my beginning band director was on here with me. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it just kind of goes all over the place. But,
what do you play? What do you play?
I played French horn whenever I was in band.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I play a few other instruments now.
That's a very difficult instrument. I have respect, my dude. That's an incredibly hard instrument to play.
It takes okay. So he was a professional French horn player. He played in the Memphis Symphony Orchestra and stuff. So he had like a test that he would give out to the beginning band students, and you had to pass that test before he would even let you play the French horn. So not trying to put any, feathers in my hat or anything like that, but I passed that test.
Not to toot my own horn, but
exactly. So, music's always
so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. Whenever you say that, you've always been into music and stuff, that kind of piques my interest because I love music, all things about music. And so, hearing you say that you play piano and things like that, I took piano lessons for a few years right after I got into band because I was like, oh, if I can play French horn, I can obviously probably play the piano. So I took lessons for a few years there with that as well. So I love hearing that people, or have those creative sides.
I music has been such a part of my life for so long, and you know, and I kind of, you know, the acting, the writing, music, they're all part of the same bag for me.
Right.
Like they're all related. They're all just different modes of self-expression, which is, you know, which I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with self-expression.
Yeah.
You have to be an artist of any kind, or to aspire to be an artist. And but yeah, it was really good to get back into composing. Or not get back into it, but really start composing. I'd only ever written stuff for piano before, but like I was like, no, I want to write orchestral stuff. I want to write, you know, symphonies and piano concerto. So I started writing a piano concerto last year, and which was now finished the first movement finally. So it's really cool, you know. And I'm like, oh, it's not very different. It's not so different than anything else I have done for years.
Right.
That's kind of the learning process for me, is realizing, oh, this is one more angle of something. This is another side of the same coin I've been dealing with for years now. This is not terribly different than acting or writing or anything else. This is just, this is this. Yeah. And it's kind of making that realization has allowed me to finish things before, which I usually was very terrible about. I'd start so many projects and just never fucking finish them. But once I kind of made that breakthrough, it's much easier to finish, because I'm like, oh, I've done this 1,000 times. Maybe not this exact thing, but I've basically done it.
Right. And
you know, and it's like the more you do, the more you're able to do, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I always love talking to musicians.
Yeah. They you can bond over that stuff. And I found, you know, talking to other musicians and things like that. So do you just play the piano, or are there other instruments you do? Do you sing? Do you do anything like that?
No, I don't sing. Oh God, no. My
Right.
husband does, and he thinks I'd be wonderful, but we disagree. I suppose if I ever sat down to learn to sing, I might be halfway decent at it, just because I use my voice professionally all the time, and so I think I get you know, whatever. But no, I've never really. I briefly tried to play violin as well in my 20s, and that just didn't feel as home on the instrument as I did piano. And because I tend to like to compose, and that's kind of my relationship to music, is I'm not so much a performer anymore as I am more like I play to work out compositional ideas, and the piano just is an easier instrument to do that on for various reasons if you're writing like orchestral stuff.
Yes.
And so yeah, I play like a composer. If that makes any sense. I play like a fledgling composer. I'm not a virtuoso by any means, but yeah, I love learning how other instruments work, because it's like writing for different types of characters in a show. Like what are the limits? What are you know, what are the unique possibilities? What's a player thinking if they were to read this passage and expect to do it? You know, that I love thinking in those terms. So while I can't play any other instrument really, but piano and maybe spoons, maybe spoons in a pinch, I love researching in other instruments and learning how to write for them in a way. So I'm, you know, familiar in that sense with you know, the whole family of instruments out there. But yeah, I want to get more into synth. A friend of mine is recently kind of become obsessed with synth, and I'm like, that's not something I've ever dipped into, but the community seems really interesting and supportive in a way that I'm not used to with classical musicians necessarily. I don't mean to throw any shade, but yeah, yeah. So yeah. What about you? Is it, so you said it was like French horn and then, but that was, you know, do you play piano at all? I mean,
I do. Like I said, I took piano lessons for 3 years.
Do you still play? I mean, do you?
Whenever I get a chance, you know, I don't have a piano at my house or anything like that, but I actually play about 7 different instruments. So
show off.
I know. Yeah. Well, you know, hey, Mr. Awesome guy that, you know, has been in almost every awesome anime that's ever been. So, you know, you can show off too. So.
All right. I guess we're even.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
So I do have a few other questions that I want to ask you before I get you off of here. Having a great time talking with you, by the way.
Thank you. Likewise.
So at the beginning, before we started recording, you told me that there was a story that had to do with your name. Because I was asking you, do you want me to call you J. Michael Tatum or just Michael Tatum? So what is the story behind that?
It's cute. I think so. My real name is, of course, John Michael Tatum, but I've never gone by John in my life. My family has always called me by my middle name. Most of us in my family go by our middle names. I don't know why. It's just a weird thing. My family is a little eccentric.
Okay.
And so John has just never been John. If someone calls me John, that's how I know. Like, oh, it's a salesperson, or it's it's something. It's a robocall. Yeah. And when I started voice acting in that show, the show that I got tricked into being one of the principal characters in was called Samurai 7, which I still think is a wonderful show.
Great show.
It's a kind of a sci-fi anime version of Akira Kurosawa's wonderful film Seven Samurai, which happens to be one of my favorite works of art ever. And the lead in the show, the character's name is Kanbei, the kind of head, sort of grizzled, somewhat cynical, but good-hearted samurai that kind of leads the charge, was played by R. Bruce Elliott, who's a dear friend of mine. Uh-huh. And he was the first member of the cast I met in the studio when I came up to do it one afternoon or one evening. I think I was working on the second string of episodes, and he was leaving the booth as I was coming in, and I got a chance to talk with him and just told him, "Oh, I love your voice," because I was the last one to record on those first 6 episodes, so I knew what everyone sounded like. Mm-hmm. And also found that their performances helped me because I was talking to real people, and so I just told him that. And he was so wonderful and gracious and lovely. "Oh, I heard you. You were wonderful, blah, 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 blah." And he always went by R. Bruce Elliott, always. And even though we all know him as Bruce, and Bevins told me that. And so later it was later that same session where Bevins like, "Oh yeah, we need to discuss what you want to be credited as." Cause those first 6 episodes are about to come out in DVD, and we, all the titles and stuff. And I was like, well, R. Bruce Elliott's classy name. Can I be J. Michael Tatum?
Oh, okay.
Because honestly, John Michael Tatum is an incredibly common name in North Texas, where I'm from. Yes. And so Michael Tatum is certainly. And so I was like, well, I need to stand out. So I decided to go by J, because hey, if it's good enough for R. Bruce Elliott, maybe some of that class will rub off on me if I do the same thing. And by God, it worked. I think I get hired 90% of the time because people just want the opportunity to ask me, what do they call me? Has nothing to do with talent or how good my auditions are. They just want to get me in to settle a bet with an engineer going, "Okay, I bet you it's John. No, it's James. Nah, it's Jeffrey." It's like, what's the J stand for? That's why.
All right. Yeah, I like that. I kind of have a similar thing with my name as well. I put my middle initial in whenever I have my name out there because it feels more distinguished, when you have that middle initial. And I actually read somewhere that when people see that, they actually have more respect for you subconsciously. And so I was like, okay, I'll start doing that, And so that when I sign my name or anything like that, I put my middle initial in there.
That's, it's smart. There is a certain kind of class that comes with the initial. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I think it's the rhythm. I think the rhythm of it now, because now your name becomes like it's just a, like Michael Tatum is nice, but J. Michael Tatum, there's like a little sound at the beginning that kind of, it's like a song verse. I don't know. I don't know. I like it. It's worked well for me, even though it drives me insane because people will not know what to call me ever. And so now everyone, including my friends in the industry, just call me Tatum because they're like, well, now we can't make our fucking minds up. So we'll just call you Tatum.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for a lot of people that first met me in the industry were so used to being me referred to as Tatum that they just thought my name was Tatum, like Cher.
Oh.
And I was like, I guess there are worse fates.
This is true. This is true. So I actually, like I said, I met you at a con, the one in Northwest Arkansas. It was in January, I believe it was. How many of those do you actually do a year?
Lately, quite a few. Right before the pandemic, I was averaging about 15 a year. And then, of course, there were no cons for about a year and a half, 2 years.
Right.
And then now we're back into it. I mean, I guess I average about the same or a little more. Okay. Like it's a lot. It's nice. I mean, again, if you'd have told me 20 years ago, one day I'd be asked to travel all over the country, in fact, all over the world,
Right.
To sit at a table all day and like meet people and sign stuff for them, that anyone would care enough for that to be a thing that I could do, I would have told you were insane. But here we are. It's so nice. I think what it has to do is, one, I've been in the business for so long, and I've been able to hoist. I've been very fortunate in order to play a lot of characters that and to be a lot of really cool flagship shows, just by sheer luck and being available. And but now it's like what I find so interesting about going to conventions is there are whole generations of fans that are frequently younger than the shows they're into. I'm like, you're like 12-year-olds will come up and want me to sign something from a show that's 20 years old.
Right.
And I'll be like, how did you find it's all streaming? Everything's streaming now.
Yeah.
And so everything is kind of existing on this continuum of available media where everyone is watching it. And we're also hitting that point where I've been around long enough to hit anniversary. Like, oh, it's been 10 years since that show. It's been 15 years since that show.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Like when I started doing this, it's voice acting. It's probably the most anonymous kind of acting there is that one can do professionally, because no one sees your face.
Right.
They may not even get to hear your natural voice, depending on what your techniques and what you're bringing to the table,
right,
for a particular character. But it's this crowd, this industry, like the fans are really involved and incredibly supportive, and it's so wonderful, because most creatives don't get this kind of support,
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm very, very lucky, and cons are kind of one of the best things about what I get to do. I love being in the booth and breathing life into a character that speaks to me, but it's so nice to just have strangers come up to you and be like, I loved you in this. It's really not, it's really nice.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's also, like, real talk, it's to have had the luck to be in a show that just happens to mean something to someone. Like they found it when they were going through something. God knows I've been there.
Right.
And now just by sheer luck, you're in a position to just smile and say hi, and it just means so much to that person because of the associations they have with your performance. And that just being empowered to do that for someone is really cool, and I live for it. It really reminds me about why we do what we do. We act, we create, we tell stories, we make music because we're trying to connect. That's what it's really all about. And so it's really nice to, not to get all mushy, sorry, but it's
totally
really nice
fine
to connect. It's really nice that it's very validating that it's proof that the connection's there.
Yeah.
When I go to cons, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And my fans are undoing so many years of psychological damage for me. Well, their love and support is just getting me through so much shit. They have no idea.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, and that is a cool thing that you're getting to experience, for me, my kids are the reason why I even found My Hero Academia. They were both fans of it, and they're like, Dad, you have to watch it. Now that's probably one of my favorite shows, and them knowing that I was out here talking to you tonight, I'm surprised I didn't have to barricade the door because they didn't bum rush to come out here and talk to you too. So your fans, they make things so cool, and being able to talk to them, like you said, they help you it's an encouragement, I guess you could say, to know that what you're doing is something that is helping somebody else.
I totally agree. It's the best part about being creative is the opportunity that what you create connects you with other people and helps them connect with each other too. Right. Like that you become part of this community just by doing something you love. Like, yeah, it's never lost on me how fortunate I am to get to do this, because it's a weird business, and I have no right to be as successful as I am at it. And yet here I am. Here I am. I didn't invent this phrase, but I use it all the time. If without fans and this wonderful community of support, man, all your favorite voice actors, just a weirdo in a padded room making funny voices.
Hey, that's what I'm doing in my garage. I'm just sitting in front of a little padding, talking in a microphone, So
yeah, right. Story of our lives.
Exactly. So if people want to follow you, how can they do that?
I must confess, I'm not terribly active on social media, but I am known to be, I'm kind of a unicorn on Twitter or Instagram. I may make the occasional post. But for the most part, I mean, I I'll announce things I'm in, but I don't, I'm kind of shy on social media. So they can follow. I have a Twitter account that they could, if that's their idea of a good time, is waiting for me to make one post, a month, they're welcome to it. My husband's trying to encourage me to make more TikToks again because it became kind of a little fun pastime during the pandemic, but I haven't done one in a while. And
those were very entertaining, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They really helped. They really helped me just keep me out of trouble by giving me something to do because I was absolutely stir crazy.
Yeah.
As much as I say I was ready for the lockdown, I was also like, oh no, I need to do something creative. I need to whatever. And we weren't going in the studio anymore. There weren't cons, so I didn't have any socialization. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not as much of an introvert as I thought. So I did that, but so I should do that again. But yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on the Twitters. Occasionally if you have a really nice podcast and you're really cool and you give me a good vibe, I'll come on your show. If you come up to me at a con,
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm a bit of a wreck.
All right.
I think it adds to my mystery. My husband, on the other hand, Brandon McInnes, my God, he's all over social media. I can't compete with that.
I follow him on TikTok as well, and his videos do crack me up, and I love watching those.
He's so funny.
He does the voice acting as well too, so
yes, he does quite well.
Yeah, and he's actually in My Hero Academia as well. Plays Sir Night-Eye, and
yes,
man, that character, I do have to say, I agree with Sir Night-Eye on something. So I'm sorry, me and my son argue about that.
I mean, we all love Mirio, and Mirio is, who doesn't want Mirio to succeed,
right?
But it makes for good drama.
It does for sure. All right, man. Well, it has been great talking to you tonight. This has been the most fun I've had in a minute. So I appreciate you coming on here. And maybe I can get you to come back on in the future because there's a whole list of questions here that we didn't even really get into.
I would love to come back on. This was great. I've had so much fun tonight. Thank you.
Awesome.
I am a talker, but not all the time. So it has to be the right person. I think we just click. So yeah, anytime, my friend, anytime.
Awesome. All right. Well, you have a great night.
You do the same, man. Let's do this again sometime.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Dawn.
And if you've ever watched a TV show and thought to yourself, oh my god, that season finale plot twist was absolutely bonkers.
Or seen a movie and thought, wow, I need to talk to somebody about this train wreck immediately.
Then we think you'll fit right in with our podcast, I Hate It, Let's Watch It. We watch TV shows like Riverdale and Emily in Paris.
And movies like Deep Water, Killer Sofa, Rubber, and Deadly Illusions. And we give them the total rinsing they deserve.
It's basically group therapy for movie masochists. So come check us out wherever you stream podcasts.
It took me 10 years to make the perfect man cave.
And then we took it over. And we made it into the multiversal chamber.
Then I started my own podcast.
And we took that over too. And we're the co-hosts, the Multiverse Kids.
Yeah, and I'm the dad, the geeky dad. And every week, we what?
We review the movies, shows, and books. Games and toys.
Yeah. And sometimes we even have a special guest. So, join us every week on the Geeky Dad Podcast.
All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode of J. Michael Tatum. He was a lot of fun to talk to, and I was very excited for you guys to hear this episode. So I've got some pretty cool stuff coming up. Like I said, this is my anniversary episode, and I was very excited to have somebody on that was a little outside of what I've had on here before. I would love to get more people like him on this show, and maybe I can in the near future. But I've been doing this show for a year now, and I have thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it. And I thank you guys for sticking around and listening, and for all the new people who have started listening, because I have seen an influx of people listening to the episodes. And for that, I thank you all. I thank you all for showing up every week and hearing what I have to say. It's just greatly appreciated. And I hope that I can continue in this next year to bring you more content that you want to hear as well. And speaking of more content, next week's episode, I will be having a man on that I've been talking to for a little bit and everything like that, trying to get this set up. I've actually had his tag team partner on the show. He was part of STF in Wrestling for a Cause. And I've had on Alex Royal. Now I'm going to have on JD. JD sounds like an awesome guy. I've talked to him over Facebook, back and forth, and he's excited to be on, and I'm excited to talk with him. He's a dad just like me, and we're going to have plenty to talk about. So make sure that you tune in next week to hear that episode with JD, and just stick around. Listen to all these great things that I have coming up. I've got a bunch of cool episodes planned out already. I'm actually planned out to the end of April right now, so I've got some pretty cool ones, like I said, so just stick around. If you guys want to follow me online, you can do so by going to Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Hive or Snapchat or even TikTok. I'm on all of those platforms. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can go to @IYGADAP, or you can just look up If You Give a Dad a Podcast. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can go to Give a Dad a Podcast. Follow me there. I'm also, like I said, on Twitter and Hive. Those are both @DadPodcast11. I update all of those regularly to make sure that you know what is coming next on the show. And just go out there, follow those accounts, interact with those accounts. Let me know what you guys think of this. And also, as you're listening to this episode, go out there and rate it and review it. And let me know what you think of this episode, and let me know what you think of any of the other episodes I've had here as well. If you're on Spotify, you can go to the top, and I have a star rating that you can give me there. If you're listening on Podbean, you can thumbs up an episode. You can leave me a comment if you want to on an episode. Same with iTunes. You can go and review it and leave me a star rating as well. So go out there and let me know what you guys think of these episodes that I'm bringing to you. If you want to send me an email, you can do so by going to giveadadapodcast@gmail.com. Send me a line there. Let me know what you think. If there's something you would like for me to talk about on the show, send me a line. Let me know. I look forward to talking to you guys. I look forward to interacting with you. So, like I said, I've been doing this for a year now, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for this show. The first year was so much fun. I enjoyed every minute of it. I got to talk to lots and lots of different people. When I made the first episode, which actually, funny enough, is my most downloaded episode, is episode 1, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with the show. I just knew that I wanted to do something. I didn't want to just quit, because like you all know, I was part of another podcast, and we stopped making that show, and so I didn't want to just quit. I wanted to do something myself, but I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out. And luckily, I was able to find enough people who wanted to come on and talk with me and things like that, to where I figured out this is what this show is going to be. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this last year, and I hope that you enjoyed this year that I'm going to be bringing to you as well. I thank you guys again for everything. I want to give a shout out to my podcast network, the OIW Podcast Network. If you like what you hear on my show, there's plenty of other shows that are a lot like mine on there that you can listen to as well. They do wrestling. They do pretty much anything you can think of. They do Star Wars. There's even one that does retro arcades and retro gaming on there. So if you like that kind of stuff, go out there, look at the OIW Podcast Network. I will have a link to them in my show notes. So yeah, go and check them out. I also have links to merch. I have 2 t-shirts that are out on Shirtcasters. Go and look those up if you want a shirt from them. I would love for you guys to get one. That way we can kind of, advertise the show. Share this episode with your friends. Share it with your family. Let everybody know about it, because I feel this was a great episode and a lot of fun to record, and I can't wait to do more like this. Also, I want to give a shout out to the guy who made my ending theme song, D-Cure. He's an awesome guy. You hear me say it all the time. He is great when it comes to making music. He's made all kinds of great music. And he created my theme song for me at the end of the show. And if you like what you hear there, go and follow him. I will have links to his page on my show notes as well. Go and follow him. Go and follow all of these people. Go out there and, give them some love as well. I love you guys. I hope that you have a wonderful week. And I will see you next time. Bye.
I'm in my room rounded, but I got a podcast on. He calls us beautiful people, then tells us who we have on. The best part of my day, though we're blocked out in my pods. Tell my friends all about it so that they follow along. And the host is kinda nerdy, but guess what I am as well. I don't feel so alone and I began walking out of my shell. Heard a story, I need a connection I haven't felt. I'll be looking for the next one, till then farewell. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. Listen closely, download and tune in remotely. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. And listen closely, download and tune in remotely.
This podcast is part of the OIW Podcasting Network.